Hello everybody, this is going to be the first out of many deck profiles and discussions. Today's is going to be Captain Sisay, piloted by Jonas.
Alright, so some of you guys have been asking for a few deck profiles from me, and I wanted to just show off my Captain Sisay deck because I think it's finally done. There might be a few cards I'd want to pick up as sets get released, but this deck has been my pride and joy for a while now. It's really hardcore, wins pretty consistently, and I wanted to show you guys how you too could make your own horrendous abomination of spamming legendary creatures forever. So obviously the commander is Captain Sisay, tap to search a legendary creature, and it's not a legendary creature, a legendary card of any type, and you put it into your hand, and this is insane. There are so many things you can do in pretty much every card type. I have at least one legendary card in here, so you can search pretty much whatever you want for whatever situation is appropriate. You want to run quite a bit of lands in this deck, including some legendary lands. So I have a suite of 5 legendary lands here. Nykthos, late game, starts producing a ton of mana. There's a lot of devotion in this deck, especially in white, so you can produce huge amounts of mana with Nykthos and search it. The 2 Kamigawa legendary lands have some decent abilities. One, the green one buffs a creature 1/1 if it's legendary, and the other one for white prevents 2 damage to a legendary creature. But the main purpose is to have lands you can always get to, and in case you're running out of lands or you need just one more to push. The older ones do similar things. They only produce colorless, but you can either regenerate creatures or prevent all combat damage from an attacking creature. Both of these are absolutely fantastic. Core Haven, preventing attacking damage is brutal. You can stop a lot of decks, especially Voltron decks. I have another 32 lands in here. A lot of them just produce both colors of mana, which is important. I have a few things that fetch forests or plains specifically, so you can run things like Canopy Vista that count as both or one, like Mistvale Plains. These just let you get to mana faster, which is hugely important for this deck. You want to be way ahead of people on mana. Everything else is pretty simple, just forests, plains, depending on your ratios. Reliquary Towers, obvious, and Temple of the False God. All of those are just really good EDH lands. The main block of this deck is going to be creatures. You run a lot. I run something around 30, depending on how my build is at the time. You want to have a ton of these guys out and build an enormous field, and in green-white, you can lock people out of stuff very easily. Iona, shut down any color you want. Avacyn, make everything indestructible, with some other cards in here that make all your permanents hexproof, or make your opponent unable to play cards of a certain mana cost. You can really stop your opponents from breaking your field. I start building my shields as quickly as possible, and making sure that no one can stop me past a certain point, or there's very few cards in the game that can stop me. I've had fields before where the only thing that can really stop me is an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, which is... It feels pretty good to know that very little can stop you. The Praetors are amazing. Elesh Norn and Vorinclex, both awesome. Elesh Norn, especially for the +2/+2 for all your creatures. You're going to have a lot of creatures out here for a long time, and having them bigger helps end the game very quickly. Sigarda is especially good for all the black players in the game, because sacrificing gets around a lot of things, especially Avacyn. And Dragonlord Dromoka is for those blue players who just like countering all your stuff. Don't let them counter anything, just pull this guy out and they can't do anything about it. Linvala, I held off on picking this up for a while, but when I saw a lot of the commanders that were used needed activated abilities, Vorl the Hulklade we had in our meta for a while, and I wanted to stop that immediately, and it helps a lot. It stops Deadeye Navigator, it stops a lot of EDH staple creatures, and you definitely want to shut that down as quickly as possible. Gaddock Teeg is the one that's horrible for everybody. No one can play creatures, non-creatures with mana cost 4 or greater, or with an X in their cost, so this shuts down most field nukes, which are generally the way to get rid of your board because you have so much. 8.5 Tails is target protection, which is fantastic. Now we get to 2 of my favorite cards. I call this the engine. Reki lets you draw whenever you cast a legendary spell, and Karametra, whenever you cast a creature, you get a forest or plains and put it in the battlefield tapped, and it's a god, so it's impossible to get rid of. When these 2 are out, I have pretty much infinite If you're playing against someone with these in a captain deck, get rid of them as quickly as possible. These these are the problem. People always try and get rid of the big threats, but these keep the deck moving. And pretty simple mana producing for Omnath and Sylvala. These work especially good in conjunction because you can store the mana from the Parlay and Sylvala with Omnath, and he gets really big really fast, which is very helpful, and you'll just have mana whenever you need it. You have quite a few removal creatures at your disposal. I run Ulamog, Ceaseless Hunger. Exiling permanents is fantastic, and this is a way to get around a lot of players who, for whatever reason, can't die to damage or have huge amounts of life or whatever. You can just exile their whole deck until they're done. Now, the Myojin of Cleansing Fire, I run both of the Myojins in this deck. For those of you who don't know how these work, you put a Divinity counter on it if you cast it from your hand, and they're indestructible with the Divinity counter, and you can remove the counter for free, and they do a huge effect. The white one destroys all other creatures. This is fantastic. Searchable Nuke is insane. This card can fix horrible situations. Glissa Sunseeker destroys artifacts equal to with mana cost equal to the amount of mana in your mana pool, which is really useful with Omnath again because you can basically make your mana pool whatever you want it to be. This card is amazing. Killing artifacts is fantastic in EDH because there's a lot of ways to instant win with artifacts. Kirtar and Mangara just remove things. Mangara exiles himself and another target permanent, and Kirtar exiles an attacking creature by sacking himself, which is really good when you have recursion because you can do it multiple times. Kamal, I don't go for very often until late game, but when you do, he's an overrun on legs that you can use multiple times. He doesn't even tap to do it. This runs over people and finishes very easily. The other two gods are excellent, just giving you field buffs. Vigilance is great. You don't have to worry about attacking with everything and not having anything to block. Trample helps when all your creatures are huge, but people are pumping out a ton of tiny tokens or whatever to block them. Surak the Hunt Caller is also amazing. Giving haste to things is fantastic, especially when you're just starting to pump out your big creatures. You can start hitting with them immediately, because this deck tends to be a lot faster than most. So the faster you can attack with all your big stuff, the easier the game's going to be for the rest of the game. Odric Master Tactician tends to be my last search. When he and 3 other creatures attack, you can choose how opponents block this combat. So basically what this means is you attack with everything and you decide that your opponent doesn't block. This is a finisher card. You have the board state to kill someone, but you can't get past all their blockers. You just tell them they're not going to do it. The other Myojin is fantastic. When you remove the counter, you put any number of creatures from hand into play. This is ridiculous, especially with Praetor's Council. That's one of your sorceries. You return all your cards from your grave into hand. So you do a lot of stuff where you bounce things back to hand and then just dump them out immediately. It's ridiculous. Ray of Dawnbringer, beginning of upkeep, return a creature from grave to battlefield. Recursion's fantastic. This combos well with Kirtar because you can sack him every turn to exile an attacking creature. It makes people not want to attack you ever again. Yomiju Bars the Way is another great combo with Myojin of Life's Web. He returns all legendary permanents that are put into graveyard other than himself to its owner's hand. Now this does affect other people, so you want to watch out for it, but you're going to have more legendary permanents than anyone else unless you're doing a mirror match for whatever reason. But this is really good if you nuke the field with something, and then you have all your creatures right back in your hand and you dump them out with Myojin, especially since the Myojin's indestructible and can get around most nukes. Safi just returned something that was put into grave this turn. It's good. Use it. And it's cheap. Akroma, obvious, just keyword soup. This card is amazing to start putting buffs on everywhere, and it's a good finisher. Kytheon's not as good by himself, but when he flips into the Walker, he's really good because he can untap Captain and make Captain indestructible for a turn. This is so good. Searching twice a turn is amazing. Your biggest limit on yourself often is when you can't get to what you need because you can only search once a turn. Now, there are some non-legendary creatures that are good for this deck. Eternal Witness is amazing. Elvish Piper is fantastic with how high cost a lot of your creatures are. He lets you cheat them in really cheap. And Seedborn Muse is fantastic. You untap all your permanents during each other player's untap step. This helps a lot with Omnath, especially because you can store all that green mana over and over. It helps when you need like a pseudo vigilance because all your stuff untaps. There's just so many things you can do with this card. Loyal Retainers is the one you probably haven't seen before. You can sack it and return a legendary creature from grave to battlefield. And you can only do this on your turn before attackers, but this is so good because it doesn't have to be one that died this turn like Safi. You can just do it to any legendary creature you need, so it's basically just a free revival. There's a few sorceries you'll run. Most of them are for big cost recursion or to speed yourself up. Time of need is searching a legendary creature. This also helps. As I said, searching twice is amazing. You can hold on to this for when you really need it. These two both get you an additional... You get one land ahead, which gets you Captain a turn faster. This is absolutely critical. Getting Captain turn 3 makes the game go so much faster for you, and you can win a lot easier. A few nukes. Wrath of God's amazing. Terminus is especially good in here because it puts them on the bottom of the library where you can just dig them out again. And Austere Command is great just because of how modular it is. I had already talked about Praetor's Council, but this is really good, especially with the Myojin of Life's Web. I'll combo these together a lot of the time. And the no maximum hand size just is fantastic in EDH. Profound Journey is another recursion. I just like it because you can do it twice. Not many instants, just basic removal, Corrosion Grip, Swords to Plowshares, and Ablation. Ablation's also good if someone steals one of your things, because you'd get the draw and you get to shuffle it back into library to get it back. It also helps if you want to save one of your creatures that you really need and can't get back from the grave, because you can just search it back out of your library. Enchantments, there's a few in here. I have 2 that are searchable. This one's technically a creature, Runetail, but when you have 30 or more life, you flip him into an enchantment that says you prevent all damage to your creatures, which is insane. This allows you to block anything you want. You can find tons of ways to use this. It hurts red players a lot. This buffs all legendary creatures you control by 2/2. That's just good. More buffs is good. You're going to have a lot of things, so that's a lot more than 2/2 all the time. These two, I wish they were searchable. They're amazing. They both make... This one makes your creatures all hexproof, and this one makes all of your permanents other than itself hexproof, and this one even has a regenerate trigger on it. These are so overpowered. Getting these out and then getting an Avacyn makes your board state almost unbreakable. Unless someone has a mass exile or a mass bounce, it's absolutely brutal. These two cards, if you draw them, you play them as quickly as you possibly can. Mirari's Wake is kind of like a Vorinclex. It doubles all your land mana, or it adds 1 extra if it produces more than 1. And it also is a 1/1 Anthem. This is really good for 5. It's very cheap for what it does, and it's extremely powerful. Frontier Siege I use a lot just because of how easy I can get Omnath. If I have this up, or in my hand, a lot of times I'll search Omnath very quickly, because you can just build up the mana. And there's a lot of cards you have that you can pay into. Like with Heliod, you can just start pumping out little clerics as blockers. There's a ton of things you can do with the extra mana. Marshal's Anthem is just a recursion spell. With a multi-kicker, you can return a ton of different creatures, and your creatures get +1/+1. The Anthem's just a nice bonus. Aura Shards, this wins games. Whenever your creature comes into play under your control, you destroy an artifact or enchantment. You can just remove all problem cards with this, because you can get rid of creatures very easy. Killing all the artifacts and enchantments makes it very hard for people to come back. And finally, the artifacts. There's a few legendary ones. Umezawa's Deity, this card is absolutely overpowered. It's horrible. I feel horrible for using it, but it's just so good. It's very versatile. The +2/+2 is probably the most used for me. Gaining 2 life helps a lot when you're low on life, and then you have to search this to help yourself. And the target removal with the -1/-1 ability is fantastic. Godsend is an interesting one. It gives the creature +3/+3, but when the creature blocks or becomes blocked, you can exile one of the creatures that's in combat with it. And opponents can't cast cards with the same name. That's unlikely to happen unless 2 players are using the same card. But this really gives you a creature that no one wants to block. No one wants to attack you when you have this up. It's just a very powerful mind game card. And Hero's Podium is another finisher. It gives all legendary creatures +1/+1 for each other legendary creature you control. So this exponentially increases the power of your field, and it's absolutely horrendous. I've thrown like 400 damage at players on one turn with things like this. And it also allows you to like look at the top few cards of your library if you pay X into it and tap, and then pick a legendary creature, put it in your hand. That's just a nice bonus. It's something to use extra mana for if you have extra mana at the end of your turn. Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, these go uncapped almost all the time. They're amazing. Hexproof is fantastic for this card. And untapping a creature and allowing it to activate a turn early is just amazing. Thousand Year Elixir is perfect. Few mana rocks. Chroma Lantern's really good. Selesnya Signet I like because it's another turn 3 captain card. Sol Ring, obviously, and Thought Vessel, last card I have in here, just because no max hand size is amazing, especially since you're going to be getting an extra card per turn compared to most players, just because you're drawing and searching. And if you've got Reki, you're drawing even more cards. Having no max hand size is pretty important in this deck, and getting to it quickly is quite important. So the main focus of this deck is that you have all the options available to you pretty much all the time. You keep Captain up, and you can do most things in the game within your colors, and you're able to lock people out of the game. You're able to buff your creatures to enormous heights. You can have spot removal whenever you need it. It's a very versatile deck, and that's the way you need to play it. You need to always be thinking, what is the best possible solution at this time? What do I need most? It's difficult to play, but once you get the hang of it and know what's in your deck, it's super rewarding. Well, hope you liked it, guys. It was my Captain Sisay deck. Thanks for watching.